Okay, if everyone's ready, I think we can get started. It is 7:30 a.m. I am in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we are set to begin. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so I am beginning with how to get accepted. We are going to focus today on how to write a college essay. I am joining you from Cambridge, Massachusetts, at Harvard University, in my dorm room this morning. Welcome, and let's get started. For an overview, just to introduce myself, my name is Victoria Sanchez. I am a Harvard University student in my second year. I am an English concentrator, and I participate in things that largely focus around English. Today, our purpose is to... I'm having some problem with... There we go. Having some problem with the audio for a second. All right, so the purpose of this essay is to show your personality to the admissions officers. It is to explain what your application cannot outside of statistics. And statistics means things like from anything from SAT scores and test scores and grades and GPA to things even like activities. Sometimes activities cannot fully explain to the admissions officer what you're really interested in and what really compels you to study. And this is what this essay is for. There are many challenges when approaching an essay, anything between mainly how many essays colleges go through every year. So for every university, there's between 20 and 50,000 essays. Admissions officers read 350 essays a week, and only 5 to 10 minutes is often allotted per essay. That means they give a very, very quick, brief, cursory read-through. And unless your essay catches their attention or is unique and significant in any way, you often are put into the maybe pile immediately or even the no, depending on the university. And this presents a lot of challenges. So you really have to work on your essay and curate how you want to display yourself in this very personal communication. It is, in fact, probably the most personal communication you will have with your admissions officer. So a prompt that is on the Common App General, which a lot of colleges use, it's a format that a lot of colleges use, is some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. Now, this is a very confusing wording, it's very vague, and so it's very difficult to kind of gauge what these colleges want. And you want to address the prompt, because otherwise you're automatically put into the no pile, because these colleges put a lot of effort and thought into the way they word these things. So to kind of break this down, this is asking in a very convoluted and vague way for your story. If there's anything in particular, what defines you as a person, what you value, what you think about, what you want to spend your time doing, and things like that, what is central to your identity, what you orient yourself as a person around. And this can be anything from your family to your organization to your favorite sport, anything that would really help the admissions officer gain insight to you as a person. So there are many things not to do when approaching this application, and I think it's a lot of times easier to go from things like this to shape your essay. Do not repeat anything already in your application. So this can be telling them you're in an activity you already had to describe and you already had to explain your position in the activity and everything like that. Do not repeat things like this. Do not be impersonal or clinical. Don't speak in the third person, for example. Do not be too objective. Do remember that this is supposed to be a personal insight into your motivations and yourself as a human, not yourself as a student, perhaps. Do not be vague or general, and do not philosophize and preach a moral. I think these two go hand in hand. A lot of times students take this and use it as a platform to really explain what they think the world should do or what should change in the world or anything like that. I don't think that's what this is for. This is for insight to you as a person, not to your view of the world, which I think is a very small nuance that a lot of students miss. So don't say things like, oh, this is about a time I realized what was wrong in my neighborhood, and use that as a direction through which you can say, this is wrong in a lot of neighborhoods, the world needs to change. As opposed to that, say, this is what's wrong with my neighborhood, and this is how I work to change it, and this is how it affects me, and this is how I think it affects people. It's all about how it interacts with you. Do not use overly complicated words. You should use a college level vocabulary, and you should try to remain engaging in your word choice. But if you just throw a bunch of SAT buzzwords or high level vocabulary in, it's going to be difficult to sift through. And not only that, it will be more difficult to read your personality past this overly complicated diction. Do not try to cover too many things. This is very difficult. Your focus and your lens for your essay should be very small. If you want to explain yourself through the method of what your desk looked like, or something less cliche perhaps, like an activity you really like cooking, that you couldn't include in your application because cooking isn't something you gain awards in for the most part. Do not go outside the realm of cooking. Do not try to cover cooking and bike riding and mountain climbing and hiking and everything that you really like to do. Just try to focus on one thing. Do not pretend to be what the admissions officer would want. This is important. Do not try to fulfill this image you have of the university. A lot of times universities are actually trying to branch outside of their own image. So if you think you might not particularly fit into a university, that might actually be what you want to talk about. It would be a really engaging topic. Admissions officers are obviously very interested in how they think the world views their university in the first place. And do not simply recount past events. You need to reflect on what you are talking about. Don't just give a very objective, impersonal account of that time that you saved a cat from a tree. Instead, say and really engage in how you were feeling, how you felt afterwards, and what that affected in you as a person. So there are a lot of things you want to do, and this includes everything from little things that you want to make sure to be doing to how to begin your essay. So you do want to include something unique and interesting. If you are in mostly math and science and your application reflects that, and you're in all these engineering projects, for example, perhaps talk about something artistic that you do, a piece of performance art you like, perhaps, or the fact that you love to draw with sidewalk chalk. Just something very engaging that if you mention it in conversation, people would say, oh, tell me more about this. It should be something that they want to learn about. You should be very, very specific. It's a good trick to use when writing these essays is to approach it from the physical perspective. For example, if you're going back through a memory, maybe talk about how the things you touched felt, or what the world looked like to you in that moment. If you were nervous, perhaps everyone looked bigger than they should be. Just very, very specific details that could help ground your essay. Not only that, it will also help the admissions officer engage and understand your viewpoint in this memory. Do create a creative and connective story. So it's very easy, especially in preserving essay structure, which I very, very much think is very important in these essays, to try to separate it into discrete points, like this is who I am, this is a story that displays that, and this is what you can take from that. You should perhaps Instead, connect all of these points consistently in every paragraph. It should also connect you to the university. It should connect you to your application. It shouldn't be a completely separate point. It should bring something new to the points you have already brought up. So, to continue my last example, if you wanted to talk about, say, cooking and you're really interested in math and science, perhaps say how you approach cooking from a mathematical perspective, or how cooking really helps you in the field of math, or something like that. You should find something you truly care about. If you do not care about what you're talking about, neither will the admissions officers. It should be something you find passion for, something you really, really are engaged in your day-to-day life. Or something that really affected you and changed you as a person. Do focus on your personality over your academics. While it's fine to talk about an academic point like a class you really liked and it changed your view completely of the entire world, or perhaps an organization you joined that you weren't sure about but you completely changed your mind about over the course of it, that's fine. However, do not just talk about how this helped you become a better student, or how it helped you really understand school better, or something like that. That's what your application is for. Your entire application, for the most part, focuses on academics, and they've heard enough about that. They need to hear more about you as a person. Of course, you work to sound like yourself. This should be an insight to you as a person, so they want to hear your unique voice. For example, if you use a kind of phrase that's very unique to yourself, you might want to try to fit that in sometimes. They want to hear your kind of personal mannerisms in speech and everything. Maybe after you write the essay, it's also often a good idea to read it aloud and see if that sounds like something you would say, perhaps not in a day-to-day conversation, but in a speech you were giving. It should sound like something you would actually verbally say. And don't forget to show your intellectual vitality and curiosity. This is a very vague phrase that a lot of colleges use. It basically just means that you're very engaged and interested in learning about people and the world and things, and you're ready to hit the ground running. They want to know that you'll be successful at their university, not just successful in your field of study. Common mistakes include thinking of admissions officers, stuffy old people. Yes, I've heard this from so many admissions officers that we've had the chance to talk to since coming. They really are normal and interesting people like us, and they like to be engaged just like we do in normal conversations. So if this would not interest, of course, if this wouldn't interest your grandmother or someone else's grandmother, it probably also won't interest the admissions officers. But if this won't interest your teachers or your peers, it also probably won't interest the admissions officers. And if you try too hard, I know I've been really pushing this unique point, but if you try too hard to be unique, it perhaps comes across as being not only too off the wall, but perhaps as too ingenuine. As, for example, talking about how you like mountain climbing, even though the rest of your family is very inactive, is better than how you won a national award for perhaps beanbag, playing with a beanbag. That it's in and of itself is not as big an insight. So if it's very unique about yourself, but it doesn't gain a lot of insight to you as a person, and you don't think it's very important to you, don't write about it, and that's fine. And don't forget that all of the people surrounding you are really, really important as you work through this essay. You need to be getting feedback at pretty much every point. If you want to wait until you have a draft you're happy with before showing it to someone, that's fine, but you should show it to someone. Now, going on with what to do, it is very important to follow instructions. As I mentioned before, colleges really put a lot of time and effort into how they word these prompts. So if you don't directly address a prompt, this doesn't mean you have to mention the exact wording of a prompt in your answer. I know a lot of people are taught like that. This doesn't mean that. What it does mean is that you need to answer the question they're asking. So if they're asking for a life-changing experience, give them a life-changing experience. Don't give them an experience that happened over a long period of time and say that it perhaps changed your life in little ways. They want to know of one discrete moment, and they ask the question like that for a specific reason. A lot of times the reasons are unclear to us, but it's the important point is that they have them and you should follow their instructions because of it. Don't forget to really analyze and think about the prompt. Now, the prompt I introduced you before, I gave you the vague idea. They want your central morals, they want your story, they want insight. But if you really analyze and think about the prompt, all the things that they gave you, okay, I can go back actually. All the things that they gave you were very, very specific examples like background, identity, interest, or talent. They want a very, very clear subject. And so they're trying to guide your thesis of the essay in that way. Don't forget to keep it simple. As I said, it should sound like something you could read aloud as opposed to something you would turn in academically to your professor or teacher. They want something that they can read and hear you actually talking to them. It needs to be a very, very personal connection. You can use foreign specific or jargon words. This might seem like a mixed signal since I said not to use too much of it, but the point is to use it in moderation. You can use college level vocabulary words, and they want to know you're intelligent and engaging, so it's very, very good to use this kind of words. But do not open up a thesaurus every time you think one of your words is perhaps too simple. Sometimes simple words are the best way to explain your point. For example, happy should perhaps have a qualification like, oh, I was elated, excited, I was euphoric. But words like I was, the bricks were red, you don't have to paint that specific of a word picture because perhaps in your mind, in your perception, it's only important that the bricks were red. You want them to focus on what you would focus on. Don't forget to cut out as much as possible after drafting. This is one of my most difficult points, I think, for students to grasp a lot of the time because it's really impossible to kill your darling. Sometimes you write something that you really, really enjoy, but perhaps you've already said it in a different or better way. And just because you really like the point doesn't mean you have to repeat it over and over. And the admissions officers are very, very intelligent people. They will understand what you're trying to say. So you really need to be as economic with your language as possible so they can understand as much of you as possible. Most importantly, do get feedback, especially from someone who doesn't know you. This could include our offices, they could include your college admissions counselors, they could include your teachers, your friends, your family, anyone. And it's good to get it from a wide range of people. Those who know you very well could say if you're portraying yourself wrong, whereas those who don't know you could give you feedback and tell you, okay, so this is what I think of you as a person after reading this. Is this right? And if it's not right, you know what to adjust. You can ask them, what led you to believe that I was really prideful? Or what led you to believe that I liked this more than I did or didn't like this as much as I did? And so that really helps you pinpoint what you're doing right and what you maybe need to work on. So with our offices, we really, really try to focus on editing your college essays. So before, as you can see, when my uncle died in a tragic car accident in the United States, my entire family intensely started taking care of each other. So in this one sentence, I can see a lot of the issues that I said not to do at the very beginning. It is a very objective recount while the writer is taking control of the situation by saying my uncle, using words like tragic. These are words that a lot of news sources use, for example. And so moving on to the edited sentence, it was probably when my uncle died in a car accident far away in the United States that my whole family started taking care of each other so intensely. This is all just slowly and quietly working to emphasize the gravity of the situation. Probably makes it very personal, like it's very difficult for us ourselves to define discrete events in our lives where things changed. And this change probably happened over a little bit of time. And so it's good to use words like probably. Far away in the United States is very good because it kind of brings you into her perspective of not being in the United States and having this kind of crazy and tragic event happen so far away from your own home where you can't really do much about it. my whole family sounds very much more colloquial. It sounds like something you would say aloud when talking to someone. And then adding so intensely at the end really brings the focus of the sentence right down to the word intensely, which I think is, if we were to define one, the thesis of the sentence. The next biggest change is my body was comfortable, but my mind was oppressed. If you will notice, that kind of sentiment and sentence is not at all present. And while it is important to show and not tell, the way this paragraph works, and especially when you're talking about something that other people might not understand, it is very, very important to be clear. And so you might want to explain some of your emotions, and that is never bad. What is bad is to explain them and just go into your emotions without grounding your emotions in concrete items and experiences. So, some possible methods and tips. Methods are ways to go about it, and tips are things to remember as you're going through. That is not exactly a do and do not, it's more pieces of advice. So, for methods, it's very, very, it's a common theme, but it's also a standard, it's tried and true. It's a very, very good idea to begin with an anecdote. And this just means going back in time, finding a memory or situation in which it really displays the point you're trying to make, and starting with that. That's really engaging right off the bat. If you start in the physical, people automatically start experiencing what you were experiencing, and they might understand your point so much better than if you start with emotion or with your exact thesis. You do want to make sure that you are unique, but I think some of the best ways to remain unique is to talk about very mundane things, whether this is things like 3 things on your desk that could really display who you are and trying to connect them in some way, talking about the conversations you have with your bus driver every morning on the way to school, anything like that, just some very integrated part of your day-to-day life that you might want to expand on because it really displays who you are as a person. And a really, really great piece of advice that I've come across recently is to talk about something you might not want them to know. Whether this is something you're slightly ashamed of, like the time when you were 8 and you stole something from your brother, or something that you think is more too personal to include, I promise you that they want to know about these things. And they're very interested in these things. And I think it's a great way to engage the admissions officers. Some tips. Being funny is kind of tough, especially across cultural boundaries. Things that are funny in the UK, for example, are not funny in America, which I found since coming here. And so perhaps your particular brand of humor won't carry over. So I would be cautious, but I would not exactly advise against being funny. I would just be cautious and make sure you get a lot of people to read it to make sure everyone thinks it's kind of funny. Make sure to show, don't tell. This is mainly about remaining rooted in the physical description and in action over like blatantly saying the points that you're trying to make. If you're trying to say that you're nice, don't say, I'm a very nice person. Talk about that time you were very, very kind to your sister, for example. And do, above all, make sure your voice comes through. They want to hear you as a person. They want to know about you. They want to hear what you have to say and what you think. And so make sure that while you're writing this essay, this is your main point. This is the purpose of writing the essay, and don't lose sight of that while you are writing it. So the process of how to do it is a very long and trying one. So I think you should start by brainstorming. This is a very, very important part that a lot of students kind of skip over just in favor of diving right in. I think it's important. Make a list of possible prompts that you yourself would want to address. So you could go from things like what's mundane that talks about yourself, to an activity that's perhaps not in your application that you might want to talk about, to a particular memory that you might want to talk about. And between those 3, try to narrow it down to one by what gains the best insight. Don't forget to ask questions to everyone. I think that's a very important point. Do make sure to retain your focus on your subject. Don't really, if you find yourself distracting yourself from your subject or maybe getting off point, make sure to drive whatever you're talking about back to your main thesis. And you should have a thesis. Don't forget to keep your essay organized. And then make sure to prove what you're saying. If you start with a philosophical or personal point, make sure you provide proof for that. They should be able to draw their own conclusions, and their conclusions should be the same ones you yourself are trying to make. So this is mainly through show, don't tell. It's a very, very important concept to keep track of. For those who have put off the essay, like we are also prone to do, there's a lot of easy ways, or maybe perhaps accessible ways to approach this essay. There are things like pick 3 things in your room, whether that's your favorite pencil, your favorite book, and the fact that you keep your shoes very organized. If you can link these 3 things in some way, then that perhaps is a very, very good encapsulation of your person. And it's also, when choosing these 3 things, it's good to walk into your room and see what catches my attention first, and what do I look at first? What do I prioritize in this room? You could also take your family photo album and talk about family dynamics, or describe a particular picture or memory inside this album. You could talk to parents, coaches, and teachers and say, what do you think defines me as a person? What do you think is something I did or something I think about that's very important to me? Because I think a lot of times the people that know you and talk to you in a day-to-day basis really perhaps know you almost better than you know yourself. And then think about something you used to believe in but don't anymore. So this is very important because it shows a shift in values and morals, which is what a lot of admissions officers are very, very interested in. Whether this is religion or something that, like, you believed it was possible to be perfect all the time, and then something happened and you realize that not everyone's perfect. In fact, no one is, and this is how you deal with that. Anything like that would really provide insight. And then don't forget to think about what you believe in and all of these philosophical considerations, but ground it in the physical, in a memory. For further information, please contact Brittany at Calibri Boston if you have any questions. We will send a follow-up email. So if you have any questions, or if you want to contact our offices, you can do it through that. If you're joining us from Ho Chi Minh City, remember to contact our offices there. And yes, please remain in contact with us. Good luck as you head into your essays. I would like to open up the floor now for some questions. So if anyone has any questions they would like to ask, I'm going to stop sharing the screen now so I can read them. And I'm going to open up the floor. Okay. And if you can't think of any questions now, it's definitely okay to wait and email us. Or if you have any considerations later on, definitely feel free to contact our offices. So right now, I am not seeing any questions. So I think we will end the session. I wish you guys luck as you head into your essays. And I want you to consider all the things I've talked about, not as commandments, but as very, very serious pieces of advice. Thank you for joining us, and I will end the thing now. Thank you.